Welcome to Straight from the Horse's Mouth radio show. I'm Paula Slater, your host. Today's guest is an equine vet who combines Western medicine with holistic therapies. I'd like to welcome Dr. Christine King from Anima Vet. Welcome, Dr. King.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
So we're going to talk about senior horses today, and in particular I'm going to talk about my horse who's 17. And my concerns, because I love him so much, I want everything to be perfect. And so that's silly and immature. So
No.
I'm going to ask, first of all, we're going to talk about the feeding of a senior horse. And for me, my first thought was, I have to rush to the feed store when I go in and say, all right, now my horse is 17, what should I be feeding him? And of course, they'll pull up all the popular senior horse feeds and tell me why it should be good and so on. And I just want to know, what should I be feeding my boy?
Right, so let's back out a little bit and begin with a bit more information about your horse. He's 17. Is he
gelding?
A gelding and a quarter horse, correct?
Correct.
Right, and he's maintaining his weight, or is he slightly under?
Yes.
Well, see, this is important because, if he's holding his weight well, whatever you're doing already seems to be working okay. As far as the macronutrients, or the big guys, calories, protein, and the minerals that we need in significant quantities in calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, whatnot. You're clearly getting that right. If he's healthy and holding his weight and has plenty of energy for the things he wants to do, are you still riding him?
Yes, but not. We're not. We don't ride in the winter. And I just let him grow his coat. The one thing that has popped up over the last 2 years has been a vertical crack, and actually, and specifically the toe, and that's an issue. And they're all barefoot, and the farrier mentioned that it needs to be kept clean and free of any fungus. So she recommended that I put a bacterial spray on it or go on the crack. Now, I've read different things that once the farrier leaves, that everything seals up. So good luck on trying to soak that in.
I mean, you can pee on a house fire if you like, which is kind of... It's not going to hurt anybody. No, what you're after is, why is that crack there? Why does it...
I believe it's nutritional.
No, the problem there is in the trim.
Ooh.
Yeah. Now, that's a conversation for another time, and I'm more than happy.
We'll do that another time.
In fact, it's a conversation we kind of need to have with pictures. So try to figure out maybe how we can do that on your website. There's in the natural hoof care universe, there's a lot of emphasis put on nutrition, and rightly so. However, there's a lot of blame placed on the horse's nutrition inappropriately when some simple modifications to the trim, to the way the horse loads that hoof, makes all the difference in the world without you changing anything in the horse's diet, assuming that the basic diet is good to begin with. So, as I say, that's a conversation for another time. I will mention, though, that if you have really wet winters where on your property, mud is a chronic problem through the winter months. No matter how good you've drained, you've made, you've graded the area around the run-in sheds. If mud is a perennial problem during the winter months, try and do what you can, particularly on the floor of the run-in sheds, to make sure that those horses have a place that they can get out high and dry during the mud season, let's say. That will help some too, but I'll tell you right now that chronic toe cracks, that the trim needs to be addressed.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the feeding. So my horse is getting our own hay, and he gets a very small amount, I would say about a cup of Easy Cubes, which is chopped up hay, and he gets he has access to two salt licks. One's a cobalt one, they're cattle ones, and then a mineral lick, and then he also has free choice mineral to get at and share.
Okay. Did you mention salt in that? Plain salt?
Salt is in the mineral. It's a mineral mix.
Right. Okay. It's
and the salt, yes, the salt is in that. And actually, the people that make it recommend that all salt is withdrawn and just the mineral is left.
Right.
And then, of course, in the summer they have free choice water, and in the winter they have free choice cold and warm heated water.
Okay. During the winter months, are you feeding any source of vitamin E or omega-3 fatty acids? Some oily seeds or nuts, something like that?
No.
Okay. The only reason I mention that is I was having a look, I Googled where you are in Canada, and it looks to me like you're geologically in a part of the continent that has pretty darn good topsoils. So I would be really astonished if your local hay was profoundly deficient in very much in the way of the major minerals, the biggies, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, sulfur, or the trace minerals. Now, I could be wrong about that. I'm not particularly familiar with that part of the country, but you've probably got the minerals well covered. And during the grazing season, when you have fresh grass, everything's nice and green, you've probably got the vitamin E and omega-3 fatty acids well covered because they're plentiful in fresh living plant material. Mm-hmm. But during the winter months, when the diet converts to basically being a hay-based diet, preserved forages, simply because, your grass is covered in snow, or, or simply most of the plant material in that region becomes dormant, that's where you need to be considering some additional vitamin E and some source of omega-3 fatty acids, because even though those two nutrients were plentiful when the grass, say your hayfield, when it was growing, as soon as you cut it and dry it and bale it and store it, vitamin E and the omega-3 fatty acids, being very sensitive nutrients, are degraded over time, and so by the time you get around to feeding that hay several months later, there's negligible amounts of those essential nutrients in a hay-based diet.
Okay, now, so how do I get that?
Well, there's lots of different ways to supplement that. My personal preference is to always be trying to feed whole food supplements if at all possible. For example, the oily seeds such as sunflower seeds, they're rich in vitamin E, not so much in the omega-3 fatty acids, but that's where flax seed and flax meal has really become, I think, an important contribution to equine nutrition.
Okay, so I do keep flax seed in a covered container, and I've put it in a special, a dedicated coffee grinder, and grind it up and put a tablespoon in the hay cubes.
Okay, that's probably not enough. This is for one horse per day, a tablespoon?
Yes.
Yeah, you're probably needing to feed much more in the order of a quarter to a half a cupful.
Okay.
Although, don't get too heavy-handed with it. It's not a cheap thing. It's a bit fiddly. Even though you could be feeding, considerably more than I've suggested, we're trying to balance economy and, nutritional value here. Well, the reason that I like the oily seeds and nuts is during certain times of the year, these would be things that would constitute part of the horse's natural diet.
Really?
Oh, yeah. See, there was, I'm trying to think of the name of the woman who did this study. It was a naturalist who basically trailed around behind some feral horses for a whole year and really just catalogued what they ate, what plants, but what parts of the plant, what was available. And it was something like 40 or 50 different, plants, made up these horses' diets variously throughout the year. Yes, seeds and nuts, these are things that the horse would forage for and browse on as they're available. So I think they make sense in the horse's diet, certainly more sense than something made in a factory.
Mm-hmm. But you need to be very, very careful. Again, I would just stick to what you recommended. just
Well,
for safety's sake?
Well, what's your concern with
I
the
guess poisonous trees, the types of poisonous trees that in whatever they produce. Yeah.
Specifically about feeding sunflower seeds? What's your concern?
Oh, well, just the shell, the outer shell,
Right.
clogging up the digestive system.
No.
When I look at the digestive system of a horse, I just
Have gross.
don't know what to
It's
say.
like the platypus, you know.
It just the fact that it flips over and all that stuff. I just think,
Right.
God, why were you doing this?
Right.
Why did you design this way? I don't get it.
I'm telling you, it's the platypus phenomenon. These things don't go together. In the small quantities that I'm talking about feeding, like a cupful a day, I've never had a single problem with sunflower seeds and colic. I have had much more problems with grain-based feeds fed in, large quantities, being colic, contributing to colic, and also poor quality hays. These are much, much more likely to cause colic in a senior horse than a cupful of sunflower seeds once a day.
All right, let's talk about poor quality hay. How would you, as a hay producer,
Right.
it's always difficult to get the best, to produce the best quality hay, to harvest the best quality hay, because the weather is a constant opponent. It's either with you or it's not, and when it's not with you, you really try to do your absolute best. But you may be in a situation, and drying is an art in itself. As a farmer, they're relying on their years of experience in picking up the hay and so on. And when you bale it, there may be dust that you can't help that it's there because there wasn't a long enough drying period or whatever. So what is like the worst?
So that's another 3 hours talking about hay. So what?
Okay.
Well,
just briefly.
Yeah.
Anything.
So what I'm talking about here, primarily, given that we're talking about senior horses and nutrition and through the winter months, is and there's many aspects to quality depending on what your interests are. Protein for growing horses and calories for work. No, what I'm talking about here, as far as hay quality, is how stemmy it is and how digestible that fiber is to the horse. And given that digestion begins in the mouth, how easily can that horse with his aging teeth break down the thick stems of the grass plant or the alfalfa plant or lucerne plant if you're feeding legume as well. So the more stemmy the hay, the more thick the grass stems. Generally speaking, the less nutrient-rich that hay is going to be. Not always, but that's a fairly safe rule of thumb. But also, the more stemmy it is, the less the senior horse is going to be able to make good use of what is there in that hay. So for senior horses, and when you're growing your own hay, you're wanting to harvest it a little bit earlier in the growth cycle of the plant than perhaps you could get away with for younger horses or for cattle. And if you're buying hay, have a feel of it. It should be fairly soft. The stems shouldn't feel like twigs. You don't want such a soft young hay that we now, the conversation now switched into talking about really high sugar levels because it was cut so early in the growing season that it might have been exposed to cold stress and be, a bit too high in sugar for the typical sedentary adult, well-upholstered 17-year-old quarter horse gelding. So I would say take a look at your hay, shove your hand into a loose pile of it. I think you mentioned you use round bales. You're not shoving your hand into that, but some of the loose hay that's fallen away, shove your hand in, have a feel of that hay. If it's fairly soft and fine, and also while you're at it, take a look at what's coming out the other end of the horse. If there's a lot of stemmy material in the horse's manure and the manure is really brown and dry and just sort of really crumbles, that particular hay is probably a little bit too fibrous for that particular horse, given his age and particularly given the quality of his teeth. The other thing I would just mention in passing, because that too is a whole another show, is when did you last have his teeth examined, or rather from about mid-teens onwards, a really detailed oral exam every year, and more often if that's what the veterinarian recommends.
Right. Well, of course, yes. I think that most of us here always have a yearly exam. Now, the problem from what I've learned just recently is, of course, not all vets are equally gifted in the equine dental area. Just like human doctors, of course, that's why there are dentists. So, again, as horse owners, just regular horse owners, we don't have a special equine dentist. So we're relying on our regular vet checks and whatever they can do. And hopefully, it's going to be a good thing, in terms of treatment.
Well, start where you are. Use what you've got, and you can expand out from there as
right.
Information comes in.
Okay, now let's say that if you do have a year where your hay isn't particularly good, you're stuck with it. What can you do?
As long as it's not moldy, I would not feed moldy hay to a horse. You're really asking for all sorts of troubles there.
No, I'm talking about, late cut or whatever.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so if it's a late cut, it's really quite a stemmy hay. Really constrained and you feel you need to use that hay, see if you can find a chaff cutter. That's a simple machine that cuts the long stem hay into smaller pieces. So you end up with chaff or chopped hay. Now, you can buy that stuff, in bags, or that's already done for you, but I'm assuming that you're wanting to use what you have rather than waste what you have, or give it to, the cow guy next door. That's what I'd be doing. So the machine is doing some of the chewing for the horse. The horse still needs to mix it with saliva before being able to swallow it safely, but that would be a smart investment, I think, if there's these years where simply because of climatic circumstances you end up with hay that's perhaps not as higher quality as you would like, but you still need to use it for economy's sake. Invest in a chaff cutter. The other thing you can do, though, if you have younger horses who are doing perfectly well on that more mature stemmy hay, and it's just the older horse that you need to be considering, is buy chopped hay in the form of hay pellets or cubes, or even the loose, chopped.
Mm-hmm. Or buy baled hay just for him and feed him separately.
Yes, exactly. That's finer. So this is hay that you don't want to be buying this over Craigslist. It's hay you need to see yourself, and as I say, stick your hand in or just sample some. It just needs to be softer and finer. Less stemmy is basically what you're after. And it still needs to smell lovely and fragrant and look as green as that type of grass hay does once it's been hayed. The quality that you can talk at length about all of the different aspects of it, but really good hay when you see it. Know good hay when you smell it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now is there anything else that we haven't covered in terms of hay and senior feed and supplements that way?
Right, so we're back in that feed store and we're getting the hard sell, and you really need to buy this stuff, and it's just specifically designed for the senior horse. Getting the hard sell, you must be your horse is X age, therefore he must have this product or some sort of senior product. So there was one thing I wanted to mention about the total rations or the complete feeds that have become really popular for horses, particularly for those whose teeth are really, really wearing out and not up to much anymore. You can actually do the same thing with hay pellets or hay cubes, sort of a homemade stripped-down version of these complete feeds, because it's not true that every senior horse needs a really high-calorie ration. If they're having trouble maintaining their weight, particularly through the winter months, then yes, perhaps some grain or some source of fat, for supplemental calories becomes part of the equation. But now we're sort of talking about medicinal diets rather than just basic management for the healthy senior horse. The horse is still a horse. He still needs to have a diet that's based on grasses, a little bit of legume, and various other plant materials. This is something you can do fairly inexpensively by making hay pellets or hay cubes the foundation of the diet rather than the expensive bagged feeds.
Now, what about the arthritic horse?
Okay. Are any of yours stiffening up or have joints up? Okay.
Not that I've seen, just me.
Oh, well, I think one of the most important components of managing a horse who's slowing down and stiffening up, whether or not he has any specific defined joint disease, of just kind of feeling the years, is regular exercise, and that's free. I think that we get very drawn towards, the fancy things in the bag, this supplement or that, bagged feed, and we're skipping the fundamentals of good health. A simple species-appropriate diet of, good quality foods, regular exercise, being turned out with their mates for horses, them being such a social species, such a herd species, just moving around together and, being out and about, sun on their backs when the sun's out. These are all essential things. They're free. We often overlook them or disregard them. Don't do that. Do your best to make sure that horse keeps moving. It's really it's begun to bother me that we get so sophisticated in how we're managing our horses that we're really neglecting some of the fundamentals. So to keep the healthy senior horse healthy, yes, at some point that horse may benefit from some sort of medicinal supplement or pharmaceutical that is specifically anti-inflammatory and is targeted at joint pain. But there's really no substitute for regular activity. Self-directed activity, such as being turned out in the pasture and playing with his mates, is terrific because typically by the time they get into their middle years, horses are pretty sensible about not overdoing it and not harming themselves at play. But if your horse is still basically sound and you still enjoy riding, then keeping the horse in some level of regular exercise is a very sound strategy as well for keeping those joints well oiled from within. It has the added benefit of economizing.
Apply the same, maybe just a little bit longer if you are riding, the same cool down and walk out just as you would yourself as a senior or more senior person.
Yes. I had a client that she adopted first one senior horse, and initially it was challenging, but she so enjoyed it. She adopted another a couple of years later, and neither of them are being ridden anymore. They're in their late 20s. But what she does is she puts on her walking shoes or her hiking shoes, and they go for a walk together. So she's exercising her middle-aged body at the same time as she's exercising their senior bodies, and they have great fun out on the trail. So that's an option as well.
I assume. Yeah, in hand. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's
yes. Yeah, walking alongside.
Now,
them, yes.
Is there anything else that we should cover? Okay, but just today we're focusing on the feeding of the senior horse, and then there are many things that we need to do in terms of care, but the food is the most important thing right now, and I'm just trying to make sure that we've talked about the basics, that best practices for a regular senior horse around the age of 17.
Yes, so this is a basically healthy senior horse who's maintaining his weight well. Yes, I think keep it simple your default setting really needs to be how has nature done it? What is the species-appropriate diet for the horse? And the more you can follow that as closely as you can, the better off. The healthier the horse remains, the simpler your feeding program, the more economical your feeding program, and the less likely you are to run into the really nasty colics.
And I just would like to mention, again, if you can talk about your website, if people have specific concerns about their own horse, how they could, you do on-the-phone consultations, and in terms of recommendations and so on. Is that correct?
Yes, I do for some things. Now, obviously, there's certain circumstances where it really needs a vet on the ground. But for nutritional things, I'm really into herbal medicine. There's a lot we can do over the phone. Even from long distances. That
for those people listening that have a senior horse, I know that the laws are such that you cannot do specific diagnosis and so on. But in terms of consultations about nutrition and feeding and just checking in and making sure that you're doing following the best practices and managing your senior horse, how can people get in touch with you? Can you give us your URL?
Oh, yes. My web address is animavet.com. It's A-N for Nancy, I-M for Martha, A-V-E-T.com. Yes, I do phone consults. I don't like to consult via email. It's just too laborious. Some things just aren't amenable to a phone consult. They really need, hands-on care. But there's a lot we can do by phone, and I'm happy to do that. So folks can just find me through my website. It's probably this thing. Yeah.
Sounds great. Now, we'll definitely have you back to talk about, we'll extend our senior care talk, and I'd like to talk about blanketing and just the things that we should be looking for and what to expect visually in the older horse, and maybe extending a little bit into hoof care. Who knows? But we'll talk again.
Okay, right. That sounds yeah.
Sounds great. All right, so I'm going to say goodbye then, Dr. King.
Okay, thanks, Paula. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed my interview today with equine vet Dr. Christine King. For more information about Dr. King, please go to straightfromthehorse'smouth.com and check out the interview page for show notes. Today's podcast has been brought to you by horselovers.com. That's horselover and then Z.com. Horse Lovers is a leader in the equestrian industry. You can find all the top quality brand names and products on their website at the absolute best price. So for orders over $100, you can get free shipping throughout the year using coupon code HORSEPODCAST. That's HORSEPODCAST at the checkout. This is Paula Slater signing off straight from the Horse's Mouth radio show. We'll see you next week. Bye.